In the small town of São Vicente, there was an abandoned house that everyone avoided. They said it was cursed, but like every horror story, some brave or foolish teenagers decided to investigate. I was among them. It was a full moon night, and the wind whistled through the trees, creating a perfect setting for a night of terror. Armed with flashlights and forced courage, Lucas, Julia, Pedro, and I walked towards the house. The doors creaked and the broken windows looked like empty eyes watching us. "Let's get in quickly and get out even quicker," said Julia, trying to disguise her fear. We crossed the main door, and the wooden floor creaked under our feet. Everything was covered in dust and cobwebs. The smell of mold was strong, almost suffocating. We walked down the main corridor to a room where there was a large mirror framed with gold details darkened by time. Pedro, always the most curious, approached the mirror. "Do you think this is the haunted mirror?" he asked, his voice echoing in the empty room. "They say a witch's soul was trapped here after a ritual went wrong," I replied, remembering the stories we heard at school. Julia tried to turn on her flashlight, but the light flickered and went out, leaving us in the dim light. Suddenly, I felt a chill run down my spine. The mirror seemed to vibrate as if something was trying to get out of it. I looked closer and saw my reflection, but something was wrong. The image wasn't mine. It was of a woman with dark eyes and a sinister smile. "Look at this," I shouted, pointing at the mirror. Everyone approached and saw the same terrifying figure. Lucas stepped back, bumping into a chair that fell with a crash. The figure in the mirror moved, extending its hand toward us. Fear gripped me and I wanted to run, but my legs were paralyzed. Julia began to recite a prayer softly, her hands trembling. Pedro tried to touch the mirror, but the surface felt liquid, as if he could pass through it. And then, in the blink of an eye, the figure pulled Pedro into the mirror. He screamed, but his voice was muffled by the glass. "Pedro!" We shouted in unison, but it was too late. He had disappeared. The mirror returned to normal, reflecting only our pale, terrified faces. "We need to get out of here," said Lucas, pulling Julia and me toward the exit. We ran down the corridor, but the main door was locked. The sound of footsteps echoed behind us, but when I looked back, there was no one there. We managed to find a window and, with a desperate effort, broke it and jumped out. Panting and with our hearts racing, we ran back to the town. No one believed our story, of course. They said Pedro probably ran away and that we were making everything up to cover the truth. But we knew what we saw. We knew the mirror was still there, waiting for more victims. That night, I swore never to return to that house. But the mirror wasn't done with us. In the following days, I began to see strange reflections in all mirrors. The dark figure watched us, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Days turned into weeks, then into months. Life tried to go on, but Pedro's disappearance never left our minds. The town was full of rumors, but only we knew the truth about that night. After that experience, we began to avoid mirrors, but they were everywhere. Every time I passed by one, I felt a chill, expecting to see the dark figure that took Pedro. The shadows seemed to follow me, whispering my name. My dreams turned into nightmares, and I woke up sweating, feeling like I was being watched. Julia was the first to distance herself from the group. The experience had left her deeply shaken. She moved to another town, trying to forget what had happened. Lucas and I tried to keep in touch with her, but her responses grew shorter and shorter until one day they stopped coming. Lucas, on the other hand, became obsessed with understanding what had happened. He spent hours in the library, researching rituals, magic mirrors, and urban legends. He believed we would find a way to save Pedro and destroy the mirror. I accompanied him, but part of me wanted to forget everything and move on. It was on one of those research nights that Lucas found something. It was an old diary of a woman named Anais, a witch who lived in the town centuries ago. Her notes spoke of rituals for imprisoning souls and creating mirrors as portals to other dimensions. One specific passage caught our attention. He who is sucked into the mirror will have his soul trapped in the reflected dimension. Only a liberation ritual can bring back the lost one, but at a terrible cost. "This is it, Carlos," exclaimed Lucas, "We need to find this liberation ritual." It wasn't easy. The instructions were vague and incomplete, but Lucas was determined. We spent nights studying every detail, trying to fill in the gaps. Finally, we were ready to try. It was a cold, rainy night when we returned to the abandoned house. The place seemed even gloomier than before. The mirror was there, untouched, as if waiting for us. Lucas set up the protection circle with black candles and herbs we found in the diary. He began to recite the ritual's words, his voice trembling slightly. As Lucas spoke, the mirror began to glow with a sinister light. The dark figure appeared again, but this time, it wasn't alone. We could see Pedro, his face pale and eyes full of terror. He was trying to scream, but no sound came out. "Pedro, hang on," I shouted, but he seemed unable to hear us. Lucas continued the ritual, his voice gaining strength. The mirror began to shake as if resisting. A gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing some candles. Fear started to grip me, but we couldn't stop. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the mirror, spreading like a spiderweb. Pedro reached out, trying to grasp our hands. With a final effort, Lucas completed the ritual, and with a loud bang, the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. Silence fell over the room. Where the mirror had been, Pedro now lay on the floor, gasping and in shock. We rushed to him, helping him up. He was weak but alive. We had succeeded. I thought I'd never see you again," Pedro murmured, tears streaming down his face. "We're here now," I replied, relieved. "Let's get out of here." We left the house, supporting Pedro as he walked. Lucas was exhausted, but there was a gleam of victory in his eyes. At last, we could leave that nightmare behind. But as we walked away, something strange happened. The shadows around us seemed to move, as if alive. And then I saw it. In the reflection of a puddle, the dark figure was still there, watching us, waiting. Though we had rescued Pedro, we knew it wasn't over. The mirror was destroyed, but the curse still hung over us. What would happen next? Who or what was that figure? And most importantly, how could we get rid of it once and for all? These questions would remain unanswered. For now. The weeks that followed were tense. Pedro barely spoke about what happened inside the mirror, but the few words he shared were terrifying. He described a dark place, a dimension where time didn't exist, and the dark figure ruled with an eerie presence. Lucas continued his research, determined to understand more about the curse that haunted us. Julia finally returned to the town after hearing about Pedro's return. Their reunion was emotional, but she soon joined our unease. It was on one of those study nights that Lucas found a new clue. An ancient manuscript mentioned a way to banish the dark figure once and for all, but the ritual required something terrifying: a sacrifice. The idea horrified us, but we knew we couldn't live forever under that shadow. We gathered everything we needed for the ritual and returned to the house, now a little more confident but still terrified. The atmosphere seemed deceptively calm. We prepared the protection circle and began the ritual. The dark figure appeared, more powerful and menacing than ever, its outstretched claws and eyes glowing with malice. Pedro stood in the center of the circle, accepting his fate with a courage that inspired us. Lucas recited the ancient words, and the room filled with a vibrant energy. The dark figure screamed, a mix of rage and desperation, as it was pulled toward the circle. Pedro's sacrifice created a powerful connection, dragging the entity back into the darkness. With one last scream, the figure disappeared, and the house fell into a deep silence. Pedro lay on the ground, exhausted but alive. The ritual had worked. We left the house, relieved and exhausted. The immediate danger had passed, but we knew that this experience would mark us forever. We looked at each other, aware that there were still unanswered questions and mysteries to unravel. And so, as we walked away from the house for the last time, one thought lingered. What if this battle was just the beginning? Thank you for watching another Dark Tales video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any scary stories. See you next time, and beware of the dark.